The abduction of Patsy and Drew. Terror reigns as aliens invade. Drew and Patsy had been married for a few years and had just moved to a small town in the middle of nowhere. They were excited to start their new life together, but soon they began to feel like something was off about their new home. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but there was an unsettling feeling that hung in the air like a thick fog. One night, while sitting outside on their porch, they noticed strange lights in the sky. At first, they joked about it being aliens, but as the lights grew closer and closer, their laughter turned to fear. The lights were coming from a massive spacecraft that appeared to be landing just outside of their town. Drew and Patsy watched in horror as the ship touched down and a group of creatures emerged. They were unlike anything the couple had ever seen before. They were tall, with pale skin and large, black eyes, and they appeared to be examining their surroundings with a cold, clinical precision. Drew and Patsy tried to stay hidden, but as the creatures moved closer, they knew that they had been spotted. They quickly ran inside their house and locked the door, hoping that it would keep them safe. But safe they were not. The aliens, it seemed, were not content to simply land and observe. They began to move through the town, abducting people right and left. Drew and Patsy watched in horror as their neighbors were taken, one, by the relentless creatures. As the night wore on, Drew and Patsy huddled together, trying to come up with a plan. But they were too afraid to even move. They knew that the aliens were still out there, and they were likely looking for more victims. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Patsy gasped, and Drew tightened his grip on her hand. They both knew that the aliens were the only possible explanation for the knocking, but they couldn't bring themselves to believe it. "Who's there?" Drew called out, his voice trembling with fear. There was no answer. Patsy turned to Drew and whispered, "We should run. We need to get out of here, now." Drew nodded, and they quickly made their way to the back door of their house. But as they opened the door, they were hit by a blinding light. The aliens had found them, and they seemed to be closing in. Patsy screamed as one of the creatures grabbed her, pulling her outside the safety of their home. Drew tried to fight back, but he was quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of aliens surrounding him. Patsy was thrown onto a cold metal table, where the aliens began to perform experiments on her. They probed her mind, her body, and her soul, looking for any weakness they could exploit. For Drew, it was just as bad. He was strapped to the table next to Patsy, and he could feel the cold metal digging into his flesh. The aliens seemed to be taking an unusual interest in him, and he knew that there was no escape. As the hours passed, Drew and Patsy were subjected to every kind of horror imaginable. They were poked, prodded, probed and tortured, all for the amusement and experimentation of the aliens. But worse than any of the physical torture was the mental damage that was being done to both of them. They were being pushed to the brink of insanity, their minds twisting and turning under the relentless psychic pressure of the aliens. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Drew and Patsy were dumped back in their home, their minds and their bodies forever scarred by the experience. They tried to tell others about what had happened to them, but no one believed them. The aliens had wiped their memories and left the couple with nothing but terrifying nightmares and a lingering sense of dread. Years went by, but Drew and Patsy could never forget what had happened to them. They never had children, and they never got over the trauma of their experience. They remained trapped in their own minds, haunted by the memories of those long and terrible hours. As they grew old, they began to realize that they were the last survivors of their town. The aliens had taken everyone else, leaving only Drew and Patsy behind to suffer in their own private hell. One night, as Drew lay in bed, he suddenly sat up, his eyes wide and his mouth open in a silent scream. Patsy woke up and tried to calm him down, but she could see that it was too late. The aliens had finally succeeded in breaking Drew's mind, twisting and warping his thoughts until he was no longer human. Patsy took one last look at her husband, now little more than a husk of the man he had once been. Then, she turned and walked out of the room, her feet dragging heavily on the carpet. As she left the house, she could hear the screams echoing through the still night air, a testament to the horror that they had both endured. And even though the aliens were long gone, their presence lingered like a foul odor, a reminder that they had once been there and that they might one day return.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and tell us what you think in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.